Method is boring, but if you apply it to madness, it doesn't get more exciting. Hello and welcome to the Interior Show with me, Aditi Singh, and joining me today is the designer duo, Smita, Khanna and Hemant Purohit, who believe that no great work can be achieved without experimentation and yet approach it in the most methodical way possible.
Hi, I'm Smita.
I'm Hemant. We are partners at Note Design.
Note is a design collective. There are about 6 of us in the office, and we really believe that each person brings their personality into the project, and that's quite important.
It actually helps a project if you have a slightly diverse set of opinions working on it. It just makes it more rich. So like each and every idea is actually tested a lot just between the arguments. And I think that the idea itself has to survive our arguments. That's what I feel. And if it does, then for sure it works well for the project.
Whether the challenge is a complex site or it's a client with various demands or trying to articulate what they want, the challenges have always been a great driver for us.
And that's quite inspiring because we almost get into their lives. So it's actually interesting also because we are living many lives in that sense. It's really not so much about a particular style or a particular design philosophy. If we believe we are too young for that and we don't want to get fixed into something like that. But it's probably about like the marriage of materiality and the use and the mechanisms. And I think that's how we approach each and every project.
Hi, Smita and Hemant. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. And why I said that you are very methodical about your approach, because you actually conduct workshops for your clients.
We try and start off the beginning of any project with a client workshop, and that's actually the most important part of a project, creating the brief, and those sort of start defining the architecture and interiors around them.
Yeah.
But before I move on to the next question, I would actually like to know that how did you guys meet each other and decide that, okay, let's start a design firm together?
Actually, we've known each other for many years. We worked together at Siri Architects. I was an intern there and Hemant was an architect. And
Junior architect.
as friends, we hit it off. It was quite important, I think, when you're going into a business partnership with someone.
Now, since it's her house, I'm more keen on knowing that who was more dominant.
I would say, yeah, actually, I think that would be the correct answer.
Yeah, so that's my husband.
Yeah.
He's a hard client to please.
Yeah. And I think both Nikhil and Smita, they were quite clear in how they want to use the space.
What fascinated me the most was the waiting area outside.
But this is a very private space. We thought it was important to create that buffer zone from the outside to the inside.
Yeah.
And this space is like an extension of the bedroom. It's a series of beds essentially in this room as well. So it was nice to have that space in front. And that becomes a public zone. You know, the kitchen entrance is from there, the staff service area is from there as well.
Like usually the vestibule area of a house is quite dark. So it was very important to have enough light inside that room.
Yeah.
So we got it from the glass. However, because the glass is not transparent, it offers more privacy to the living area inside.
You've actually got old cinema chairs over there.
Right, I think they go pretty well with the screen, which actually defines the waiting zone from the living area.
Where did you source those from?
So those are from Bungalow 8. And I think they've sourced them in turn from an old cinema in Bombay.
This is an extension of the bedroom, right? It's more of a space for your friends to lounge in. Now, how did you go about planning this?
By non-planning.
By non-planning.
By breaking down all the walls.
Right. Yeah, this was actually a 2-bedroom house.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but as like Smita said, that the first thing was just to clear up the whole space and make it one big lounge space. But because this is at the 4th floor, the foliage of the trees, they come at this level.
Yeah.
And they were just so pretty, which is something like very unique in Bombay. Yes.
So all the windows were made to frame the trees around, and we've been lucky that 3 sides of this house have these really beautiful old Bombay trees, and we're right in the middle of it.
So also what I noticed as he talked about the structure of the building, it's slanting, right?
Yes.
Now, how did you try to complement that feature of the structure through the elements in the space inside?
Because the walls are not parallel, it's some kind of like a like a trapezium in plan,
True.
we tried to use it to our advantage. Like the first thing is we don't want to put everything against the walls. Like we have such like beautiful trees outside the window, and on the other side we have a wall which is used for artwork and for TV. But each and every furniture set or like a sitting area is actually detached from the boundary, and it is sort of like forming its own space within it.
And how about the choice of color palette? I see mostly, there's black, white, and brown.
Yes.
Was that planned? Was that a conscious decision?
So it was a conscious decision. It was obviously partially also experimental. You don't generally find black floors. And because this was a sort of relaxing zone, we thought, to work with this color palette.
Okay.
We finally decided on this Brazilian slate because not only is it black, but it has this texture inside it. These veins which are also black and grey, and it's almost like they're deep within the surface. It's very similar to when you look at wood grain. And then we have this discussion about turning this floor onto the wall.
Turning the floor.
So if you see like we've got high dados, which generally like skirting is quite small, and here we made it a little higher. So it feels that you're sunken into the house. It's even more cocoon-like.
I've never seen a black Brazilian slate before used as flooring. Tell me about its advantages and some of the disadvantages that maybe many of us don't know.
Actually, it's the material. Slate is generally used as a cladding material, so it's not used on floors. This Brazilian slate is fantastic because it's quite soft and it's quite flat. There were a few issues with laying it because it's soft, so you have to be very careful in laying the material itself. And because it's not generally used as flooring, finding the right coat was quite important. There's a temptation to put the strongest coat and then it becomes shiny.
Cloth.
Yeah, which we don't want.
It's turned out pretty nice because it is the correct level of like mattness which is there. So it is now very easy to maintain. At the same time, there is no glare and there is no real like reflection coming off the floor. So it is the correct level of warmth in the house now.
How about the curtains and the fabrics that you've used?
We've used plain felt for the curtains. Usually felt isn't used as curtains, but we wanted black house. We felt that we can use it in its pure form as sheets, and that's what we've done.
And we just wanted to also use a lot of fabric and a lot of textiles for the furniture because again that's very comfortable to touch and just like lounge around.
So let's talk about the lights. Right in front of me up there, I see this piece really unique. I've not seen that before. Really gigantic and again makes a statement.
Yeah, so it's also another piece from Chor Bazaar. We brought it in, we painted it ourselves because it was originally this metallic color. We got a few nervous looks about bringing it into a small space, but if you have this one piece in the house, right, I think it looks fine.
You don't need anything else. And now moving to the master bedroom. First thing I noticed was that I saw no closets.
Again, which is a very zen space. The idea was that it was going to be a very large bed. We have two walls which are just windows with beautiful trees outside. There's no point in covering it up. We only have one blank wall left.
Yeah.
So the cupboards got moved into the bathroom space.
And I think in this house, again, the walk-in wardrobe became very interesting just in terms of how it was designed.
Yeah.
Like the kind of material that was used inside, and maybe like the tiles were actually very interesting.
We wanted a little bit of a personal touch instead of just buying everything. So my husband Nikhil and I, we actually painted. We made these Rorschach ink splatter sort of paintings, and then we got them printed on plain white tiles.
Yeah.
And that's how we got the bathroom tiles. So.
Another thing that I noticed that's actually common in this space, in the lounge area and the master bedroom, is the ceiling.
So the apartment had very low ceiling, and which is again quite like typical of all the apartments. And we somehow wanted to distort that particular proportion. So we were working with a number of false ceiling designs, and I think this particular one is actually like faceted, and it distorts the scale and the perspective of how the space feels.
Yeah.
It also makes you feel like you are inside a tent.
Yeah, I mean, it does create that effect. Never seen that before. On that note, why don't we head to the next space and check that out?
Sure.
If you want to experiment, then go the whole hog. Well, that seems to be the philosophy of this fascinating South Mumbai residence that Smita and Hemant have brought me to now. fascinating because it has this old Mumbai feel to it and yet has a young vibe. Siddhant, it's lovely to have you on our show. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's good to have you here.
Now, I know that you guys love to experiment, but don't you think this is the biggest experiment ever taken to have your brother as a client?
I wouldn't say it's our biggest experiment, but it was a challenge for sure. Sometimes we tend to forget what the boundary between client and brother is.
Yeah.
And I think Hemant had a lot to do with that, mediating, making sure the streaming isn't too much.
So, what exactly was the brief to them?
I wanted a place that was very open plan. The way I like to entertain and the friends that I have and the way I live, it had to be a very open plan house. So that was the first major point in the brief. The second point was that I live alone. There's no staff or there's no other family members.
Yeah.
So the house had to be very geared to the way I wanted to live.
Yeah.
It was more like a place for live, work and play.
Yeah.
We knew that he will be spending a lot of time here with his friends, but also he may want to work here at times.
Yeah.
So that created a very unique brief for us, which was a great opportunity because we could do something new.
So, Siddhant, you wanted this house to be a place where you can work and also, obviously, invite your friends over and have a good time. But wasn't that a challenge to actually strike a balance between the two?
I don't think it was a challenge finding that balance. Again, like it was mentioned earlier, we know each other really well.
Yeah.
She's my sister and I've known Hemant for a long time. I was very clear as to what the role I wanted them to play and why I wanted this house designed in that way. So I don't think it was much of a challenge.
Okay. But you were pretty clear on what you wanted. What about those things that you were absolutely clear about that you did not want them at any cost?
Any cost is a relevant term. This is a rented flat. So it's very, very clear I'm on a budget. I had a benchmark and a budget and I made it very clear from the outset to the architects that they can't go above that.
Was that difficult for you to sort of incorporate?
So his brief was one thing which we had to fit into the space. The second was because it's a heritage building, we can't change things like plumbing and electrical points. And layouts had to be approved by the society, which was very strict.
What I wanted to know is that since you touched upon the fact that this is an old building, right? It's got that old worldly charm to it. But when it comes to the elements or structurally, what were those elements that you had to retain?
The things we wanted to retain were the tiles, the 100-year-old tiles. We needed to polish it up, find materials that complement them because there were gaps in them.
Yeah.
The ceiling, for instance, it had a false ceiling, but we wanted to open it up and retain the truss and beams that existed.
We had to retain all the windows on the facade, but we just changed the look of them and the kind of glass which was inside.
Are those plug points actually retained because they're right in front of me, so I can't get my eyes off them?
No, actually, we sourced them. So there were really ugly plug points before, which were new.
Yeah.
And we replaced them with these.
Yeah, we actually thought that these plug points went better with the kind of space that we had.
In this huge apartment, which is that one space where you love to spend most of your time?
The kitchen, actually. So not for cooking. My bar is actually part of my kitchen. It's an open plan kitchen, so the whole house actually revolves around that.
Okay.
So the kitchen's there, the stove's there, my drinks menu, the coffee machine, all of this floats around there. So bulk of our time is actually around the island in the kitchen.
Well, thank you so much, Siddhant, for talking to us and having me over.
You're welcome. Glad you like the house.
I did. I loved it. And since we've already had a glimpse into the house, let's go ahead and have a quick round of it. Smita, we already talked about the house being very vintage. Now, what catches my attention first is the roof above.
So there was a false ceiling running through the entire house. It was a 100-year-old false ceiling. We cut this 2-foot by 2-foot hole in the ceiling to check if everything was fine there. And it seemed okay. And then when we removed it, it was even more fantastic than we had imagined. So what we did is we blocked that side off and we put lighting inside it. So at night when Siddhant's entertaining people, we just like
have those lights on.
Yeah, and just the roof lights up and the rest of the lighting is quite ambient and light. So if you see the lights on the walls, those are the lights we sourced from our vendors in Chor Bazaar. So they're all originally ship lights, which we retrofitted into the house.
Well, also tell me about the chairs. They look pretty old.
So these were chairs that Siddhant had bought from Bungalow 8 at one of their sales, and they of course have lovely vintage furniture, so he got those. And the only thing that we added to them were these upholstered sort of cushions.
Yeah.
And the idea is that they're comfortable to sit on when you're on the dining table, but you can pick these up and throw them about.
Yeah.
So when there's lots of people, you're sort of can sit anywhere you want. And then the dining table became a exciting task in our office because as you see, it's not a round table.
Yeah, it's oval somewhat.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
So we call it the note circle. It's about getting the perfect, imperfect circle.
Well, talking about the waiting area, now that's something we don't see in most Indian houses.
In some places, we do waiting areas which are very specifically just for that. In this, there's 2 uses. So he uses it also as a more intimate bar setting. And otherwise, yes, when he has a few people who come in for meetings, it's a great place. It's right near the entrance. It overlooks this veranda. Again, the chairs were from my grandparents' house. It's a very modernist Delhi home, and Sid loved them. So we said, okay, we're going to bring them in. And that seemed like a great place. But what we wanted to do was, again, couple it with something which is quite contemporary. So the 3 sort of coffee tables there match the dining table. So again, the note imperfect circle. So
Well, Smita, I'm in awe of how you have transformed this space while retaining its old worldly charm. So I'm even more curious to sort of foray further into the house and check out the rest of the rooms.
okay, let's go.
Smita, this room is largely white,
Yeah.
right? What is the idea behind that?
So this room had to be clutter-free and really simple. Like as you see, there's only a bed,
Yes, only a bed.
and that's all we wanted to keep in here.
And how about the tiles here? I noticed that these are different from the vintage tiles that run across the living space.
This is originally kitchen flooring. Again, quite neutral. It's also the space where we didn't want to spend too much money.
Yeah.
Because most of it is being covered by the wooden bed and the
Okay.
platform. So we left it as is. We polished it up and left
Okay.
it.
And how about this wooden bed? Because I'm sure up there are many people, many bachelors who probably want a similar setup.
We got it customized so it fits in perfectly to the space. The other thing is, because we wanted a large double bed,
Yeah.
if you had a freestanding one, there wouldn't be enough space to actually walk around it and have sufficient side tables.
Yeah.
So this made sense.
Oh.
Again, it was a request. I don't want flowing fabrics that I have to maintain.
Oh my God.
So we got blinds, and these blinds are all waterproof, wipe down, clean, very simple mechanisms and very basic.
Well, Smita, let's go ahead and have a look at the walk-in closet. Smita, I must say that this space clearly and completely justifies a walk-in wardrobe.
Sid really wanted a large
Big.
bathroom. So we thought combining the wardrobe and the bathroom area would make it that sort of grand luxury.
Yeah. And another thing I noticed that you didn't use heavy cupboards that people usually tend to use in a walk-in wardrobe.
So it's actually a very efficient way to hang your clothes. It's cost efficient as well.
Yeah.
So these are just curtain rods that we've used
Wow.
and made the stands out of wood. And by extending the counter, the wash basin counter, we got additional storage as well
Storage.
for him. So he has things in drawers.
Yeah.
He has his platform for his shoes. below
Shoes.
that. Just in terms of bathroom planning, a good plan usually has you come out of the shower and you have a dry area to get dressed in.
Yes.
And if the bathroom was small, which is what we generally find in Bombay apartments, it's quite hard to fit it in. So this became a very easy way. So he comes out of the shower and he has this, space to get ready.
Yeah. But I must say that keeping in mind that this is a bachelor pad, Siddhant has kept everything pretty neat, especially the walk-in wardrobe, which actually tends to be in a mess.
Yes. I think that is part of the design. So we'll give
was-
ourselves a pat on the back for
Yes,
that.
definitely. Well, Smita, you've pretty much taken me through everything. After all those insights, I have to thank you for it.
You're welcome. It's been great having you guys here.
It's my pleasure. Now, the one thing that both houses had remarkably in common was a waiting area. Something that's not too common in big city households, mainly because of space constraints. But it turns out that there might just be a way to work around that. Now, Smita and Hemant, my first basic question to you guys is that most modern houses are not very huge, and hence there's not much space to carve out a waiting area. So I'm sure there is some minimum space that you require. So what would that be?
A waiting area doesn't necessarily need to have seats in it. It doesn't need to be necessary for seating. So the minimum could be, just enough to screen off the rest of the house if somebody's at the door.
So in terms of like screening the door and those people, you can just use a plant. You can use some kind of partition like a screen or something. You don't have to build a wall.
But how do you at the same time also ensure that, a guest doesn't feel alienated in a waiting area?
So one key thing is to make sure the waiting area isn't a leftover space. It doesn't look like, so this neglected sort of zoned away space. So you have to make it pretty. Like there should either be sculpture, plants, etc. Or light is a big factor in this space because it's generally the darkest part of the house.
What kind of furniture do you think is suited best for a waiting area?
What we've done in some projects is used the storage for your shoes, etc., and keys as the partition between the main house and this waiting area.
Okay.
And you don't need to make it very comfortable. I mean, there could be just stools over there and something very light. It shouldn't be very bulky or not something very ornate in that sense.
Okay.
So in another project, we've used a line of plants, which demarcate the space. In another place, we have sculpture there.
Thank you so much, Smita and Hemant, for all that information. But it's time to move from the waiting room to the query room because it's time for us to address all your queries. And I'm sure Hemant and Smita are all set to give you the perfect solution. So are you guys ready?
Yes.
Let's start with the first question. Shikha from Kolkata says, in my ancestral home, I have old wooden shutter windows. I want to take these shutters with me to my new house. How can I reuse them for my new apartment?
The woodwork in Calcutta must be really pretty and it's from an old house. So there are various ways to use it. I think some of the most conventional ways is that you can use them for a storage shutter, or you can add it to maybe the waiting area furniture as well, because it will give an identity. Because now I think these pieces have become pieces of art in themselves. Just maybe you can also add them to the headboard of your master bedroom bed. I think
that'd be interesting.
Also...
Let's move on to the next question. Manish from Mumbai says, my grandfather has a collection of old vinyl records and a dysfunctional gramophone. I do not want to discard them. How can I include it in my decor for my house?
So one technique that we've used quite a lot is the idea of framing. So even in Sid's house, there's an old gramophone which we left as it is. It was an art piece. At my place, you put them in bell jars. So it was just about framing. The way you would frame an object would become quite important.
And maybe the covers of these vinyls are also quite interesting. And in fact, they are now collector's items. So you can literally frame them and you can put them on the wall.
Okay. With that, let's move on to the second last question of the day. Saket asks, I do not like paintings or photographs as a focal point on the walls. What are the other ways in which I can accentuate the walls of my bedroom?
So, there's very typical ways where you play with the texture of a wall or you use materiality as a way. But one thing that we've worked a lot with is this light and shadow and, a nice way of understanding how the light falls on the wall and how shadows fall could be quite interesting.
Yeah, but you can have a graffiti on the wall if you want to. You can have the wall itself as the canvas.
And now the last query of the day. Aisha from New Delhi asks, I have a lot of wine bottles in my house which are very pretty. How do I include them in my interiors?
Glass bottles themselves are wonderful refractors of light. So that's the first thing that comes to our mind, either, even if they're empty or they're filled.
Just put some fairy lights in it. That's what I've done in my house. The easiest thing.
And a collection of them with fairy lights is amazing.
They can actually act like a screen again for the waiting area. Because if you just put them together, you just have to organize them together. So they form some kind of a grid or some kind of a screen. And I'm sure they will have their own the color variation. Some will be green, others will be brown. So once you put them together and when light passes through them, maybe it's a modern take on the stained glass work.
But it seems like the waiting area is that space that incorporates everything. And it's easy to demarcate now a waiting area. Well, thank you so much on that note, Smita and Hemant, for spending the day with us. And thank you for those lovely insights. It was great to know that there are other ways to do up your house than just going the conventional ways. It was a pleasure having you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Be experimentative, be unique. That was clearly the mantra of the show today. With that, it's time for a wrap, but I'll be back next week, same time, with yet another interesting episode of The Interior Show. Till then, goodbye and take care.